Today we do Pirates of the Caribbean, or as the Compass said, Caribbean Pirates, so that you wouldn't think I was going to do a Johnny Depp movie, and I'm not. But as we get started, let me point you to my favorite Vulcan scientist, who says, I don't care if my PowerPoint presentation has 320 slides, you are staying until it's over. And the phaser pulled, so beware. Those of you who are my age, probably when you think about pirates, think about Errol Flynn and the movie Captain Blood. But because of the Disney franchise, Pirates of the Caribbean, you may think of Johnny Depp, and the younger audience may say, Errol who? I remember when my dad went to see the movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and he came out of the movie shaking his head and said, he's not Errol Flynn. He's not Robin Hood. Errol Flynn is Robin Hood. We have an opinion. We know some stuff about pirates. We've seen a movie. We've read a book. And there's an interest seen by the fact that you're here this morning up at 9 o'clock on your vacation. Our exposure to pirates really begins, as far as 20th and 21st century goes, and 19th century goes, because of a novel written by Robert Louis Stevenson. Stevenson wrote Treasure Island, and it has become the guide for pirate stories ever since. The ruthless pirate who, by the end of the story, has been converted to a civilized man. That theme runs throughout a lot of pirate literature. It's thanks to Robert Louis Stevenson. First made a movie in 1934 starring Wallace Beery and Jackie Cooper, and then redone in 1950 starring Robert Newton and Bobby Driscoll. And it is because of Robert Newton that all the pirates today say, "Arr!" and "Shiver me timbers, me teeth you fought me fair and square." Robert Newton did that, and that's why pirates today, we just copied it. That's why they talk like that today. Another man who wrote a book about pirates may not be as recognizable to you as Robert Louis Stevenson, J.M. Barrie. And if it weren't for the modernization version, you probably still wouldn't recognize Peter Pan and Wendy, but the Disney company picked it up, and they have made Peter Pan popular around the world. And Edward Thatch, or Blackbeard, has become the model for Captain Hook. They designed Captain Hook based on the appearance of that real-life pirate. Now, I said most of us have an interest in pirates. Jackie Bouvier, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, is a little girl. Jackie Bouvier had in her bedroom at home a full-size pirate flag and other pirate memorabilia from a little girl. She was interested in it. About 3 years after Jack was killed, she had a pirate party for Caroline and John. She hired a pirate ship, complete with black flag and full sail, and sailed it up the Narragansett River. Friends were dressed as pirates. Secret Service agents were dressed as pirates. They had buried treasure on the sand for the kids, and not just John, and Caroline, but their friends to dig up. She even got one of the Secret Service agents to walk the plank. And it is at this point of the talk that David runs the risk of getting into trouble, because I have my own list of people that I think should be forced to walk the plank. And I start with politicians. And secondly, with newsreaders who think that their opinion is more important than the actual news event. And third is politicians. And fourth is sports figures who forget that we partially pay their salary, and they are role models. And fifth is politicians. And sixth are religious or clergy folk of whatever sort who think that their wallet and the size of it is more important than the preaching of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And seventh is politicians. And you see where this is going. And if I start naming names, I may be pitched overboard. I had a cruise director tell me one time, David, you can voice any opinion that you want. Just remember, half of your audience will agree with you, half of your audience will disagree with you. And so since we're all friends at this moment, I'm not naming names, you name names, and we're going to go on quickly before I start and do get in trouble. But pirates have become a clever marketing tool, and you recognize, there's a little bit of captain in all of us, and that's tough to do sober. I don't know what it would be like if you weren't. But Captain Morgan, who has a fantastic story to tell, and we have to do another cruise together for you to hear that story, was an incredible pirate, but he has become a symbol for a brand of hooch. Captain Crook used to be part of the McDonald Land gang. There was Hamburglar and Mayor McCheese and Captain Crook. And somewhere along the line, he's disappeared from the lineup. Long John Silver's great little seafood shop. The peg-legged, one-eyed pirate has disappeared totally from the advertising for his restaurant. In fact, they've taken his name out of it for the most part, and it's now called LJS instead of Long John Silver's. And Captain Horatio Magellan Crunch used to fight on the box of cinnamon Captain Crunch with Jean Lafitte. But the only place you find Jean Lafitte these days is on eBay. But there's advertising going on all the time with pirates. Well, let's go back a bit into what I'm calling the olden days and pick up the formation of the United States Navy. The first 6 ships built for the United States Navy at a cost of about $300,000 was during the time of the Barbary pirates. Another great story that we'll have to sail together again to hear. But the U.S. Constitution and 5 sister ships were built to battle pirates. The American colonies have another relationship with pirates. Here is Charleston up the Cooper River, and New York and Boston. We think of pirates as stopping ships, raiding towns. They also had another relationship with the civilian population. America, at the beginning was an agrarian society, and much needed, obviously, but there's not a lot of money in it, especially when you want manufactured goods from the old world that have to be transported over. Prices are ridiculously high if you can get them at all. So here come the pirates. They've stopped ships, they've raided other towns, and they come in to these 3 colonies especially, and they say, see anything here you'd like? And the merchants and the population, if there was something there they'd like, they'd negotiate a price. The pirates would agree. They'd exchange money for merchandise. Then the pirates have coin of the realm, and they come into the city and spend it. So it was a great relationship going on for a number of years. And successful pirates helped the American colonies to become successful. Well, let's pause with a quote from the Bard, Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 3, that which we call a rose, by any other name would smell as sweet. You can call it a tulip, it still smells like a rose. But what's in a name? If you are a pirate, it makes a big difference. It could make the difference between whether you live or die. First of all, there's a pirate. Pirate is quite obviously an outlaw. Someone who has every law-abiding office of whatsoever nation after him, and if he's caught, he's going to be tried and he's going to be hanged. That's pretty simple, pretty basic. A pirate is an outlaw no matter where he's from. Now, there is another group, and we mentioned these yesterday in passing, called privateers. These are pirates with a license. A local government gives a pirate a letter of marque. I'll show you a picture of some in just a moment. The letter of marque, from the French word to seize, means I give you a license to pirate as long as you attack my enemies. I won't try to stop you. I won't try to hang you. And we've got a deal worked out where we'll share the loot. The privateer, then the buccaneer. Now the buccaneer, this term has become generally applied to all the pirates, but it was a specific group of pirates, a community of men who, for political reasons, despised Spain, went to the island of Hispaniola, the little Spanish island discovered by Christopher Columbus, and they set up meat processing and leather tanning industry there. The little huts that they processed the meat in were called boucans, and the name then was applied to them as buccaneers. And then the swashbuckler, again, that's a universal name for pirates today. The term swashbuckler, however, was applied in the 17th century to land-based villains. If you were a thief on land, on foot, on horseback, whatever, you were called a swashbuckler. But somewhere a novelist or a movie producer heard the term swashbuckler and said, man, that sounds great. We're going to use it in the upcoming pirate book or pirate movie. And those are the basic names by which these folks are known. Now, from the beginning, as soon as humankind, put forth in ships, there were pirates. The Phoenicians, being the first people probably doing merchandise by means of sea transportation, were the first to be attacked by pirates. So they hired Greek forces, Greek army, to come on board and to protect them. And then other people hired them in the reverse, and the whole thing goes up. The Minoans, the Egyptians, all of these were facing the threat of pirates during the early days of sail. Now, the Romans pretty much put an end to piracy in the Mediterranean area during the period called the Pax Romana, the Peace of Rome. There's an interesting pirate story from this time. Julius Caesar was captured by pirates. He vowed when he escaped, he'd come back and kill them all. He negotiated his own release. They said, okay, we agree to the terms. He left, came back, and killed them all. Great story. Be careful when you're negotiating with pirates or with Julius Caesar. Once Rome slips to the side of history, pirates return, and this time they return in the guise of Vikings. You're looking at a map of England with the little area of Lindisfarne. The date was June 8, 793. Vikings came ashore there one morning under the cover of sea mist. The church had a monastery there. The Roman Catholic Church, or the Catholic Church, had a monastery there. And it was the wealthiest place, the greatest repository of wealth for the church in all of England. The Vikings found out about it. They came in, and by the time the mist cleared, they had all the money, and all of the clergy at the monastery were dead. And this is the reintroduction, basically, of piracy as after Rome has slid to the background. The Vikings were natural at this. They had great ships that were very useful for piracy in that they could get close in. They could actually go up rivers. And there are records of pirates, Viking pirates, attacking Paris at least twice, coming up the River Seine. Their headpieces were fearsome creatures that were calculated to terrify the locals, and they were removable, so when they went back home, they wouldn't offend the local gods. They'd take them down, wrap them up, and sail back in, all part of the genre. Now, the golden age of pirates, we've mentioned this yesterday. I mentioned this yesterday, and I want to touch a little bit on some things I didn't have time to tell you yesterday. I gave you a couple of reasons for the start of the Golden Age, notably the wars in Europe that kept forces out of the Caribbean, and the pirates could pretty much do what they wanted. And I referred to the letters of marque at that time and did not tell you that King Henry III is the one that got the whole thing started. He's in a war against France. England and France fight each other off and on up until the 20th century, I suppose. And at this time, Henry is out of money. He needs more weapons. He needs more men. And he's taxed the people to the point that he just can't raise another farthing in taxes. Well, what he comes up with is an ingenious plan. He gives a letter of marque to pirates who will then attack the French. They'll split the profits. The pirates get rich. The king gets money. The king gets soldiers. The king gets weapons and can continue his war against France. Trouble is, the French aren't dumb like the English perhaps think they are. They catch on real quick and they start issuing letters of marque, and the whole thing escalates. Here's an actual French letter of marque from 1688 giving a certain pirate free rein to attack all the English ships he wants. One of the interesting things about these letters of marque, most pirates at the time could not read. Many law enforcement officials at the time could not read. So if a ship was stopped and it's a French ship and you're a Frenchman, you hold up a piece of paper and say, oh, letter of marque, letter of marque. And it might have been the laundry list or the grocery list. Nobody knows because they can't read. Now, we were talking earlier before we got started about research, and I want to pause here and give you a bit of warning. When I was first writing this talk, I'm looking for letters of marque, and I use Google search for finding the pictures that you're looking at. I set up the search parameters so that I find pictures in public domain, which means I don't violate copyrights. Although as a teacher, I'm allowed to use them as long as it's not for sale and publication. But I try to avoid those so I know I'm not violating copyrights. And I find in public domain this particular letter of marque. Now, it is written and published as a fake letter of marque. A lady has a pirate site and she's collected a lot of things, wrote her own letter of marque, and it looks great. And she says this one's a fake. Well, this one is put out as being real. A letter of marque for Edward Teach from Elizabeth I. Trouble is, Liz was dead 70 years before Blackbeard sailed. So this is a phony. You've got to be careful when you're researching on the internet. You remember the pretty young girl who said she was dating a French model, and this big Hulk lumbers up and says, bonjour. And she's asked, where did you meet him? And she says, on the internet. Well, after finding a couple of pictures under letters of marque, I went back and looked again, took the S off, searched singular for letter of marque, and I found this. There is a line of fancy women's underwear sold under the title letter of marque. Totally different thing than what I was looking for. However, I'm quite sure that this young lady dressed like this could capture most anybody she wanted. So, as Sergeant Phil Esterhaus used to say on Hill Street Blues, let's be careful out there. The discovery of the New World is another thing that gives rise to the pirates, because now there's an extraordinary amount of wealth and it's easy pickings. Before he was hired by Isabella in 1476, Columbus sailed to visit his brother in Portugal. The ship was attacked off the coast near to Lisbon. He escaped, swam ashore, went to stay with his brother, and there he finds a series of maps and charts, begins to study them, and here's where he polishes his theory that you get to the east by sailing west. Nobody else is buying into it much until he gets Ferdinand and Isabella to come on board. and agree to his terms. He says, I want 10% of all the wealth that I find. I want to be known as Admiral, Governor, and Viceroy, and to have a hereditary peerage for my family. This is a great deal for Isabella and Ferdinand. They don't actually pay for the whole fleet. He has 3 ships. 2 brothers donate their ships, and the third one's hired. So for that little bit of involvement, they get 90% of whatever they find, and Columbus sails off to find the end of the world or the Indies, whichever comes first. And one of his sailors, whose name was Colon, actually sights what we know as San Salvador first. And he hollers out, "Land ho." Well, that's a big deal, because Isabella had said, whoever sights land first, I will give a lifetime pension to. He hollers "land ho." Christopher Columbus says, "I saw that hours ago." And he gets the lifetime pension. Columbus goes to La Isla Hispaniola, the little Spanish island, which is today Haiti and Dominican Republic. And there he finds the Arawaks, one of the original settlers in the area. And they have gold ornaments and gold objects. And Columbus says, "Aha, looking for spice, we found gold. This is a better deal." He takes some gold, he takes some of them captive, takes them back to Europe, and the gold rush is on now. Spices drop into the background because now there's gold, and Spain, as I mentioned yesterday, controls everything but that island and a couple over here and half of this one. The wars in Europe keep the forces out. You know the story. There's lots of money. There's lots to be had. Here's some actual Aztec treasure that was stolen by the Spanish conquistadors. Here's some recovered treasure from a shipwreck. Lots and lots of wealth there. And just to give you an example, Captain Avila is taking a 3-ship convoy back to Spain, loaded to the gunwales with treasure. In fact, they are so full of treasure and so heavy that they're wallowing in the sea. The French privateer Jean Fleury easily catches up to them, captures 2 of the ships, 1 escapes, and here is a partial. Here's some of the loot. Here is a partial list from Avila's ships: 680 pounds of pearls, 500 pounds of gold dust, 150,000 gold ducats, 3 cases of gold ingots, 5 cases of silver ingots. Incidentally, in this time period, gold and silver are worth virtually the same thing. So when the Spanish find silver in Central and South America, they are really excited, because they bring back tons and tons and tons of silver back into the realm. Feathered cloaks, chests of jewels, gold mask figurines, and exotic birds and animals. Let's take one example: the 500 pounds of gold dust. Before we sailed, I converted 500 pounds to Troy ounces and then multiplied it by the close of gold the day that I did the calculation. That 500 pounds of gold dust before we sailed was worth $9,187,920. And that's just part of the partial inventory. You see the money that's out there. You see why pirates are so ambitious and why it's such a successful undertaking. We mentioned the pirate democracy yesterday. In fact, that was the thrust of the whole talk. Let me introduce you to a pirate captain you haven't met yet. His name is John Gow. His ship is the Revenge, and his men agreed to about a 12-point contract before they come on. They sign their X, they make their mark in whatever fashion, and they pledge to follow these articles of the voyage. Number 1, if any man shall try to run away, he shall be marooned with 1 bottle of powder, 1 bottle of water, and 1 small arm and shot. Being marooned is the worst possible punishment that could befall a pirate or anybody else for that matter. That man that shall smoke, and this This is the spelling from the document. Shall smoke tobacco in the hold without a cap to his pipe, or carry a candle lighted without a lanthorn, shall suffer the same punishment as in the former article. You smoke where the powder is, you're going to blow us all to kingdom come. So if you don't, we're going to maroon you. This is one of my favorites. If at any time we meet with a prudent woman, that man that offers to meddle with her without her consent shall suffer present death. It's the only death penalty spelled out in the contract. If you bother a woman who doesn't want to be bothered, you're going to die. And again, just to remind you, and if you weren't here yesterday, they had the first, pirates had the first workers' compensation package. If you lost an arm in battle, you got 600 pieces of 8. That's a right arm. The left arm, 500. The right leg, 500. The left leg, 400. An eye, 100. And a finger, 100 pieces of 8. A piece of 8 being 1/8 of a Spanish dollar. If you were marooned, if you were lucky, you were put on a deserted island with a chance of living. Mostly you were marooned on a sandbar, and when the tide comes in, you're going to drown. Most pirates didn't swim anyway. You're going to drown. And so they gave you the pistol and the powder and the shot so that you could dispatch yourself before you drowned. And one of the most famous people who was a privateer to be marooned was Alexander Selkirk. He was sailing in a ship called the Cinque Port. He was the first mate, and they came into a spot called Masater. It's an island in the Pacific off the coast of Chile, known today as Robinson Crusoe Island. And he told the captain, the ship is in need of repair. We need to careen the vessel. That means tip it over on its side, fix the side that's sticking up, tilt it the other way, fix that side, or we're all going to die. The captain said, we're in Spanish waters, we're an English ship, we can't take the time, and you've caused trouble before, I'm not going to believe you, and we're going to sail. And Selkirk says, well, I'm not going. The captain says, fine. Offloads all of his belongings, and he is marooned for 44 months on Masater. Woodes Rogers, whom you know from yesterday, sailing the ship the Duke with a companion ship, the Duchess, comes to Masater for supplies of fresh water and wood, find Alexander Selkirk. The short version of the story is he becomes part of the crew and sails back to England and takes part in some adventures, becomes a wealthy man. In the Bristol Brewery pub, he meets Daniel Defoe. Daniel Defoe is a struggling writer. He's in his 60s. He needs some kind of work, some kind of book to succeed. He goes to his agent after talking to Selkirk and says, I've got this great idea for a novel. His agent says, you know, novels don't sell. It needs to be a factual book, particularly in relationship to travel stories. So Defoe produces The Life and Strange Surprising Adventures of Robinson Crusoe of York, mariner, who lived 8 and 20 years alone in an uninhabited island on the coast of America near the mouth of the great river, blah, 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 blah. That's the title of the book. And it is incredibly successful. Robinson Crusoe is still in print after almost 300 years. Defoe wrote in the preface, it is a just history of fact. Neither is there any appearance of fiction in it. It's all fiction. And it's based on another man's life who, I'm getting ahead of myself. The initial print run was 1,500 copies. They reprinted it 4 times that year. It was serialized in a newspaper for 65 weeks. And not one time does Defoe ever mention that Alexander Selkirk was the model for his hero. Well, after all this, with the money you see, the adventure, let me invite you to join a pirate crew. Maybe you're ready to sign on and sail under the black flag. And why? Why become a pirate? Well, number one, there's money in this. One part of the inventory, remember, $9 million. To see the world, American Navy used to advertise this as a reason for joining up, and you got to see a lot of the world to prove their manhood, also to prove their womanhood. There were a number of women pirates. A couple of successful ones were Anne Bonny and Mary Read, who deserve a talk all of their own, but we'll have to sail together another time for you to hear all of that. The women would become part of the crew. It was easy to disguise the female form because the clothes were bulky and not form-fitting at all. Most men at the day wore their hair long, so that wasn't a problem. They didn't shave, but that meant if they're men, they hadn't gone into puberty yet, so that's no problem. But when a lady came to her menstrual cycle, again, that is not a big problem because there were a lot of pirates who were found with blood in their private areas because of disease. And so they're easily acceptable, and after the hard work and the bad food, the lady's monthly cycle might stop anyway. And so there were really a number of women on board pirate ships, and the most successful pirate of all time was a woman, a Chinese pirate. And as I've said, you may have heard me say, that's a story for another cruise. They sailed to escape criminal prosecution and to extract revenge on their personal enemies. And pirates came from all of these places. The Welsh, the Irish, the English, everything you see there, even some indigenous North Americans became pirates. Some came from the South Sea Islands to be Caribbean pirates. There's a whole nother bunch of pirates in the South Sea Islands, in Asia, and but these were in the Caribbean. One of the most famous pirates of all time came from Puerto Rico. Number 21, playing right field, Roberto Clemente. And as long as you're smiling, let me stop here and give you a couple of the jokes I've warned you about. What is a pirate's favorite letter of the alphabet? R. Correct. Pirates had pierced ears. How much did it cost to have their ears pierced? Oh, now let's not see the same hands all the time. I heard it out there. A buccaneer. What was a pirate's favorite island? Gotcha. Aruba. Now, you're looking at this guy. Let me tell you his story. This fella met up with one of his mates one day. They hadn't seen each other for years. And his buddy said to him, "What in the world happened to you?" He said, "Well, my first venture as a pirate, a cannonball hit my leg, tore it off. The doctor fixed me up, gave me a wooden leg. Incidentally, if you lost a wooden leg in a battle, you got paid for that too. The second time I got into battle, I'm up on deck and I'm sword fighting and I get my arm cut off. The doctor fits me with a hook and I'm up on deck practicing with my left hand now because I can't hold a hook in my right hand." And his friend stopped him and said, "Wait a minute, what happened to your eye?" He said, "Well, this is the first time I've practiced with my hook. A bird flew over and pooped in my eye." Oh, come on, it's better than that. You don't laugh, you get to hear the hubcap joke. And my wife shakes her head and says, "Don't tell him the hubcap joke." Oh, one more and we'll get on with this and stop the silliness. Disney owns the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. They own the Star Wars franchise. I've got an idea. They need to put the two of them together. I don't know what they'll call it, but I have a character for them for this combined franchise. And it's R2-D2. Three important officers on board. The captain, who is standing there on top of a mountain of treasure. You know that the captain was voted in by Democratic vote. His job was to find treasure and keep them alive. As long as he's doing that, he stays captain. He had to be an excellent battle tactician. He received the largest share of the booty, but they agreed to what each person's share was before they sailed. And he could be voted out, but not within 5 minutes of a battle, 10 minutes of a battle. The navigator was the most educated man on board, next to the doctor. He could read, he could follow charts, he could read the compass, he could navigate, sail latitudes with the stars and the moon. And one of the instruments of navigation that was developed during this time was developed in the age of piracy. It's called the backstaff. Before, to sight a latitude, you had to look at the sun and sight it. And as you were warned during the eclipse, don't look at the sun. So this one, you put the sun behind you, it reflects, and you can set your latitude, and that was developed during the time of pirates. And I show you Errol Flynn again to remind you of the story. He was a civilian doctor on board a ship that was stopped by pirates. The pirates, and not just in the movies, lined them all up and said, all right, what's your job? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And if you're a doctor, you're a member of the pirate crew right now. If you're a navigator, you're a member of the pirate crew. You have no choice. Anybody else want to volunteer? You can, but these people are put onto the ship as members of the crew. It's to your advantage to be impressed onto the crew, because if you're captured and you can prove you didn't voluntarily sign up, you'll avoid the hangman's noose. And the surgeon was the other of the triumvirate that was important. This is their number one operating tool. And if they couldn't find the ship's surgeon, they found the carpenter. They were both knowledgeable of the same piece of equipment. Up till 1860-ish, 1870-ish, on land and at sea, this was the number one instrument for operating in the theater. I took a battlefield tour of Gettysburg one time, a walking historical tour, and the lady took us by a building, and she said the body parts, the limbs, the legs, the hands, the feet, were stacked up to the top of the windows outside the operating theater. John Woodall wrote a book and developed The Surgeon's Mate, in which known medicines and homeopathic cures were developed for shipboard use, a number of instruments for the doctor to use. The ones on the blue sheet are dental instruments. I don't know about you, but if I have a toothache, I'm going to keep a toothache. I don't want to be attacked by those things. Now, when a pirate went ashore, 3 objects for the pirate going ashore. Number 1, to eat anything that did not taste like what they had been eating on board ship. Because what they were eating on board ship was yesterday's leftovers. They have a pot, and whatever they have goes into the pot. If you were a pirate and you were disabled so that you couldn't stay a fighter, you could become the cook. If you're one-armed, you could still stir the pot. And after a while, that gets kind of, you're tired of it, or it's awful yucky, so they wanted anything that didn't taste like what they'd been eaten on board, and fresh insect-free bread. They made a bread for on board called hardtack, which was flour, salt, and water. They baked it until it was hard as the proverbial rock, and you had to cut it off, hammer it off, break it, dip it in some liquid to be able to eat it, but it didn't rot. You picked it up when you ate it, you look for holes. If there are holes in it, you shake it. If it rattles, you turn it upside down, and shake out whatever creature is inside. If there are worms inside that are pink, go ahead and eat it, because there's still some nutrition. If the worms are white, it's only good for carving buttons or throwing at an enemy. It's not worth eating. So, hot victuals. Number 2, they wanted to get so drunk they wouldn't be able to tell the floor from the ceiling. And there are many pubs ashore that cater to the pirates. And the term half pint comes from the days of pirates, when you'd order a half pint or a full pint. And number three was to meet ladies on shore and spend their money and their time in their company. Now, I've talked about gold and silver and pearls and all of that. One of the things that the pirates wanted to get and was important to them as those other things were fancy clothes. They had a law in those days called sumptuary laws that meant if you were the witch of which there is no witcher, you're one of the nobility, you're a judge, you're a sheriff, you're somebody up there high in society, you can dress like this. Well, the poor people wanted to take a little of their own back, so they dressed like that. The law said, if you dress like that, we'll hang you. Pirates don't care about that, so they wanted these clothes. And if they go ashore dressed like that, they're obviously somebody of wealth and position, and they'll be attracted to the cooks and the bartenders and the ladies. So fancy clothes were as important as gold and silver. Two more things and we're finished. Why did pirates wear earrings? Most every pirate wore earrings. You know that they got them pierced for $1 an ear. I just won't give up. Why did pirates wear earrings? Number one suggestion is to improve their eyesight. I am told there's an acupuncture point that if pierced will, well, not pierced in acupuncture, but if applied, you'll be able to see better. All you ladies with glasses and pierced ears, you've just disproved that theory. Gentlemen as well. And it's also a cure for seasickness because of imbalance. You put a piece of gold on that side and it properly adjusts your balance and you won't get seasick. Again, questionable theory. It's portable wealth. Obviously, you got gold in there. If you need to buy a round for the house, you've got an earring, you can plop it out. And that portable wealth is good for funeral expenses. If you don't want to be just left to the sharks or whatever, you get your buddies to agree to put you in a casket of rum and send you back home. And you've got gold to pay for it. The real reason is why you wear earrings today. They're fashionable. That's the only thing. It's a long way for much of nothing. Well, one final pirate and we're finished. I want to tell you the story about an Irish pirate. You saw that list a while ago and you know that many pirates came from Ireland. He was an Irish pirate captain, was in a fierce combat with invaders from a northern place and was outnumbered. Their backs were against the wall, and he called on one of his mates, who was a Polish pirate, to come in and to help save the day. Bill Mazeroski was the pirate captain. His Polish sidekick was Bill Mazeroski. Second pitch of the bottom of the ninth. The only time the World Series has been won with a walk-off home run in the 7th game of the World Series. And that is the Pirates of the Caribbean.